Hi, Olly.
Hi, Olly.
Hey, Ollie.
Yo, hi Ollie.
Hey there, Olly. How's it going?
What is the best way to learn a new language? Arguments rage about this online, but I'm a big fan of when I want to learn something new, I want to find someone who's already done it and ask them. So I decided to call up 5 friends who have learned an awful lot of languages and ask them so that you can make your own mind up. How many languages do you speak?
I speak 7 languages to different levels, and I am currently learning German. The languages that I currently speak are English, Japanese, Russian, French, Dutch, Spanish.
Depending on what it means speaking, I would say I've been learning 14 languages, 15 now. So I speak at least decently well 10 of them. Italian is my native language, and you have English, French, Spanish, German, Dutch, Portuguese, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Hungarian, Greek. I'm learning Serbian right now, and there's a couple of other languages I surely forgot.
I speak 6 to 7 languages, and I say 6 to 7 because any language learner knows that you're always going up and down. But I speak Portuguese, French, English, Spanish, Italian, Greek, and Egyptian Arabic. The last 2 are works in progress.
Up to about 9 now. So obviously after English, French, Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese, German, Italian, Swedish, and Mandarin Chinese.
I speak 29 languages, but all at different levels. So I think in 6 languages I can have deep conversations, like talk about a lot of different topics. And the other 23 languages are really like the basics. I'm still learning them. I make a lot of mistakes, but I still make progress videos of it about it because I like to get advice from people. And I always think like it's use it or lose it. So I think it's cool to show the entire adventure, including my struggles.
So if someone's going to learn a brand new language for the first time, they're going to give themselves 1 year to learn the language. How should they go about it?
The easiest thing to do right away is to find some music artists and to find TV shows in that target language that you like.
I don't particularly like the word best method, but I do believe that there are some guidelines that you can abide by if you want to start learning any language successfully. I would say the first thing is to connect emotionally with the language. A lot of people do not even start with that. They think you're going to give instructions about how to learn a language. If you don't connect emotionally with a language, I think that the first obstacle, then you're going to crumble. So that's the very first thing. And my piece of advice would be to take some 20 minutes, 30 minutes, complete silence to jot down the real reasons why you want to learn a language. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure that you learn every day. Frequency is much more important than intensity. People tend to think, I have to learn 2 hours a day. You don't. 30 minutes a day for the entire year, and you're going to reap the benefits. So make sure 30 to 45 minutes when you're fresh, either in the morning if you're a morning person or at night. And third is you get the best language learning resource you can find. You invest some time in finding something that works for you. If it doesn't, you try again. But it's really important to find something at the beginning that helps you get a good grasp, a good command of the basic structures of the language to get started. This is what I would say. And then you align 2 or 3 resources. You do one at a time in the first 3 months. Then the second 3 months or trimesters, you do another one, and then you do another one. It's very important to have at least 3 or 4 resources aligned. You do it one at a time.
That's very interesting. It is interesting how you focus very much on finding the thing that works for you. What if you don't know what works for you because you're doing this for the first time?
That's a really interesting question. Well, you have to give it a try. I believe that you have to harness the power of the internet. Either you have to try things yourself and see if they work, but you constantly have to ask yourself, does this work for me? So think outside of the box. Don't think, this works because everybody says so. Just think and reflect and think, is this working for me? Because something that is working for some other people, maybe you see a YouTuber that swears by that method and it doesn't resonate with you, then you have to try something else. So that's what I think is important. You have to make sure that you try stuff until they work for you. But of course, you can use some of the advice that is bestowed upon us from the YouTube community or the internet community in general. And then you try things and you check of what other people think, and you can gather some other ideas, not the other way around.
If you can't immerse yourself, I'm a big traveler. If you can't go to the place where it's spoken, I always say that you can bring the travel to you. So create a world where you're living in that language, whether it's consuming Netflix shows in the language or listening to podcasts and news outlets in the language, following social media creators who post in the language. So it's really like, look at what your habits are and turn that into a different language. So on my feeds, everything is in a different language. And this is all free stuff. So you could do that. But then also, I highly recommend journaling in a foreign language. That's my thing. So when you journal and when you're writing, you're translating your personality in that new language. And then to take it to the next level, you want to hire a tutor so that you could read those journal entries and hear yourself speaking, but also get corrections. And then make like a cool new friend who speaks the language. So I got a whole like cycle of this.
Bring the language to you, journal, and work with a tutor, and get a friend.
And get a friend, and also do some revisions in the app space, right? Like there are so many apps out there that are great to have passive review sessions, whether you're like washing the dishes or doing your nails, which I love doing, or like running on the treadmill. I like combining two things with one. So it's like, if you're gonna be working out, how do you put a language in that? Maybe it's a yoga class in a different language, right? Like all the content that you consume can be translated, and that's what you got to think.
For me personally, one of my favorite all-time tips is learn how to say a lot with a little bit of language, rather than saying a very little amount of stuff with a lot of language. I think a lot of people in school can relate to that, where you end up over years and years. Part of the problem, I think, is you accumulate so much language in your head, so much grammar, that you can't say anything. And that becomes overwhelming. So one of my top tips is like, get comfortable saying a lot of things with a relatively little bit of language. You go a very long way.
I really like that. How do you go about doing that?
I do a lot of sort of sentence pattern, drilling and manipulation. It's amazing when you just get very basic sentence patterns down, how adding a few more words can suddenly give you 100 more sentences, right? So I think that if you've got a way to get reliable, natural sounding sentences with particular patterns, then you can go such a long way in just getting very comfortable. How many places can you say how to go to? How many things can you say how to do or eat or drink? Like, it sounds so simple, but I've seen it time and time again, where with just a few hundred words, for example, and some extremely good patterns, you can say thousands of sentences. And again, you're not going to be a native like speaker, but as far as like what can you get months, I think that's one very good way to approach it foundationally.
I don't believe that there's one best way. I'm also like developing my style all the time, of learning a language. So all the time I find new patterns, new ways to study a language. What I really think, it depends on your goal. Like, what would you like to achieve, So I have more a language learning style, which works for multiple languages at the same time. Let's call it the instrumental strategy. And that's like a sort of style where I try to get each language at a B1 level or higher. So like, as I said before, there are 6 languages on a B1 level or higher. So I get as much languages at that level. And once I speak it at that level, I'll use that language to study another language. So for example, I have a teacher who's helping me with Thai, but she's explaining everything in Chinese, So I'm not even sure if my speaking level in Mandarin is B1, but let's say it's A2. Even with an A2 level, it is possible to study a language in another language, So that's what I try to do. So once I'm at that level, it's like in a sort of safe area, and I feel comfortable, confident, and I try not to study other languages in English or Dutch. I try to use another language instead. And from that point, it is so easy to improve the target language and to improve the instrument at the same time, and to not forget the things which you learned about it. So that's what I do. And to get to that point of B1, well, this really depends on the circumstances and stuff like that. But what I try is I try to find friends who speak different languages. I try to practice with them, and I try to throw it in my daily life. So I text people in Russian, for example, and I try to use the new words which I didn't know, and I try to understand how the cases work, for example. Language learning is like building for me.
So if you had $500 to spend on this language project over the course of the year, how would you spend it? Would you spend it on teachers? Would you buy textbooks? What would you do with that money?
I would definitely save at least 100 or 200 of those dollars for italki lessons or lessons with tutors. It doesn't have to be italki. It could be like tutor lessons on like Verbling or different website. Maybe spend 100 of those dollars on maybe language learning apps, like a nice subscription or two, and the rest I would probably spend on textbooks or audio programs. I mean, there's stuff like Pimsleur. There's other stuff that perhaps you don't have to spend money on, like language transfer, which is free. But in general, I would say, programs or textbook would be a good bet for the rest of the money.
I think 500 euros even too much. I mean, like I said, it could be 200 or 300 is more than enough. What I normally do is I spend, even if you could download stuff from the internet, but I really treasure the work that these people put into crafting these beautiful language learning resources. The first 100 euro, like 70, 100, depending on the language learning material, I invested in language learning material for beginners, if I'm learning a language from scratch. Then the second thing, surprisingly, is the amount of paper that I use to print stuff. When I move from that resource into the next resource, like for example, here you can see this is one resource that I'm using. It's just one of the many. It's Asamil, but you can have a lot of others. It depends on how you use it. Then what I do is that I print a lot of paper. Because I work very well and I focus very well on paper. So I would say that instead of just spending money in the resource itself, I spend money in printing stuff.
That ink is expensive.
Indeed, ink is expensive. I don't do it with my own stuff at home because I go to the shop because it's less expensive for me. And I have a guy who just prints the stuff for a lower price, and that's true. It's expensive, but the thing is that I find once I finish using one resource for beginners for 3 to 4 months, then I venture into the beautiful world of the internet and I find resources like podcasts with transcripts, and then I make sure that I download transcripts and I print them. You could even put something into an iPad and read it, but I prefer printing them because using paper also stimulates your motor skills. So I invest quite a lot of money in a year in paper. That's what I would invest. I would recommend people invest in if they like paper, working on paper, and a lot of people do. And the third thing, maybe 100, maybe it's a little bit more than 200 euro, is investing in a good tutor with whom you can talk. Once you get the grasp, have a basic grasp of the language and you feel like you want to start talking after 3 to 6 months, depending on the language, then it's a great investment to talk to someone and invest money. People think, oh, I'm going to go to this web app and then I'm going to find someone, I'm going to do a language exchange. Yeah, you can do that, but it's much easier and more reliable to have a tutor to talk to. And that requires a little bit of money, not even that much, but for 30 lessons, you might spend 200 euro. So that's what I normally invest my money on and what I would recommend people invest their money on. Not so much into expensive stuff that is not very, very useful. You can do so much just with finding the right resources and investing a little bit on paper and technology and using the amazing technology we have.
I would probably buy a plane ticket. But again, if I can't buy a plane ticket, I think the good way to split it up, it's investing a certain percentage of that in a package for a tutor. So what I did when I was starting to learn Egyptian Arabic was I committed to 20 lessons and I bought a package. So even if I got lazy or fell off, my teacher would be like, hey, Joe, your package is going to expire. And that expiration date made me book way more lessons than I would have. So, just go for it. Buy that package of 20 lessons, schedule your stuff out. Another thing is investing in a pretty language journal. And that journal can be your space to, again, translate your personality with cool writing prompts. I have free writing prompts on Joe Club on Instagram. Go get your prompts, translate them. And then another portion would be to invest in these passive review apps. So whatever you're into, you could buy a premium membership. I really do believe in investing in your language learning, because if you're spending money, you're gonna use that app.
Do it.
If you're spending money, yeah, you're gonna go to that class. Some people may not, but it's crazy. Like there's psychology between investing money and showing up. Like if you pay for an expensive gym, you're going to be going to the gym to work out.
So honestly, I've ever spent $500 on learning any of my languages, right? So to be honest, that's a great budget. I think it's fantastic. And I would say, honestly, I mean, especially with my previous tip, it's like, if you could stretch $500 out an extremely long way if you were to, do things like talk to tutors and teachers, but with maybe specifically targeting building up a wonderful, rich bank of those, again, relatively few sentence patterns and grammatical concepts, but lots of different ways to use them. Good words, good phrases, expressions, I just think you could go such a long way with a couple of textbooks, maybe a simple subscription to an app, and then just some wonderful sessions with some great people out there on online services.
So you get a couple of textbooks to learn the basics and then spend the rest of it on teachers to help you practice what you learn.
Yeah, I mean, one of my personal other favorite tips is like the idea of learning the same material over and over again from different source materials, right? So every language I've ever learned, I'll learn all the beginner stuff like 5 times over the course of a year, but I'll always do it from a different book or a different app. And so I think with a few different sources like your textbooks, your apps, I mean, you go such a long way with very little money. So I think the rest of it, wow, you could just have so many great sessions building up that material.
That's cool to know, because a lot of people would just drop thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars on like some university course or big, big course of some kind. So it's great to hear that you can do it without spending that much money.
Yeah, I really think I've never, ever, ever spent that much money on a single language.
I think it's good to start with books. If I'm honest, like that's the skeleton. I think I would say, because like if I have a book, I have a sort of like, let's say the book is my camp. There's always something which I have, which is like smiling at me. Like I'm waking up, looking at my books, and I think like, hey, cool, I want to read something. And whatever, like if you lose motivation or if you are on holidays and you have a book with you, there's always like a moment that you can read it, grab it, and have a look at it. And I also believe that a teacher is good, especially for the pronunciation, but I think it's good to start with a book. Maybe first try to see if you love the language, how is it, play with the language, stuff like that. I think a book, a grammar book, is a great way.
There are 2 things that are most interesting about this for me. First of all, it should be obvious that there is no best way to learn a language. And this is important to say, because often I find that people get very hung up on this idea that there is a perfect method here. This book over here, that is the best way to learn a language. But here you've got 5 highly accomplished language learners, all of whom have a totally different approach to learning a language. They do different things altogether. So it's a useful reminder for us that we should be seeking our own personal best way, the thing that works best for us. And sometimes it might not be the thing that is most kind of efficient, but could be the thing that we enjoy the most and that motivates us the most. It's a very important mindset thing to have. The second thing is, it's notable what these guys don't do. They don't say, right, when I learn a new language, I go and hire a teacher to teach me, or I go and sign up to this evening class or something like that, externalizing the learning. They take control of the learning. They listen to music, they watch TV, they find friends to practice with. They learn a few key sentences and then figure out how to say a lot of things with those sentences. It's about really bringing the language into your life. Like Joe said, bringing the travel to you and combining lots and lots of different elements to just kind of coexist with the language over time. Let me know in the comments if you picked up any interesting ideas from this video so far. What's most interesting for me, again, is how different everybody is. Whether it's how they go about learning the language, whether it's how they spend a bit of money on language resources or lessons or whatever, everyone does it in a totally different way. But it isn't always like that. The US military, for example, has a very strict and regimented way of how they teach their new recruits a new language. And in this video, I show exactly how they do it, including some methods with some very strange names.